Now there was a king, Bakht Nasr, and when he came to Bayt al-Maqdis, Jerusalem, he completely killed everybody and wiped everything out. He didn't even leave the houses standing. And the books of history say that he completely decimated the place. When a great man of Allah Azza wa Jal, a prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal, Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam, came by, he had with him some dates, some fruit, some water, and he was riding a donkey, a mule. He traveled to this city and he saw that nobody was there, everybody was dead. All this violence and all this bloodshed and all this oppression and all this tyranny. And this place was completely destroyed. He thought in his mind, knowing that Allah Azza wa Jal was going to resurrect everything, Allah Azza wa Jal was going to make it better, but the thought came to his mind that how will Allah Azza wa Jal make this happen? And the glorious Quran in Surah Baqarah Sharif says this, verse 259. How will Allah revive it after it has perished? When he saw this utter destruction, nobody was alive, and he was passing through, he thought, how is this going to happen? So he carries on his journey, and he takes rest at a place. And Allah Azza wa Jal puts him to sleep for 100 years. When he wakes up, by that time, another king had come into his place. And that king, 70 years after, had brought the city back to life and had made it even better than before. And the city was now flourishing. Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam wakes up from this deep sleep, not knowing how long he slept. And the scholars write that first of all, his eyesight returned. And then he watched his body, his entire body, come back to life. And he was then asked, okay, look at your fruit, look at your water. These are the things that go off very quickly, and yet they were perfect and fresh. But look at the mule, the donkey you had. It had completely disintegrated, and there were a few white bones there. And then while Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam was watching, suddenly the bones came together, the flesh came upon them, and this mule, this donkey stood in its place before him. Amazing. Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam gets on board and heads back, and he sees this amazing flourishing city. Now remember, at the time he was quite young. He'd been sleeping for 100 years, so he goes back to his home. And he goes to his village and he says, okay, I am Uzayr. There was an old lady there. She had lost her eyesight and she had lost the ability to walk. When he said this, look at the aqidah, look at the beliefs of the pious predecessors, and especially the old ladies. And we've heard many waqiyat, many stories of the pious predecessors saying, okay, I want to die on the aqidah of the old ladies of the village. Look at this old lady. She says that if you really are Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam, that I know that my Uzayr alayhi salam was the one whose du'as were accepted in the court of Allah Azza wa Jal, mustajabud dawat. So if you really are Uzayr alayhi salam, then pray in the court of Allah Azza wa Jal that my eyesight be returned to me and my legs start to work again. Hazrat Sayyiduna Uzayr alayhi salam makes dua in the court of Allah Azza wa Jal, and this old woman regains her sight and regains the power to walk. He then comes to his own house. Now by this time, his own children are actually over 100 years old. His grandchildren are quite old as well. But Hazrat Sayyidina Uzayr alayhi salam, by the mercy and the will of Allah Azza wa Jal and this great miracle, is still young. His hair is still black, and they can't believe it. They then say that our father had a mark between the shoulders. They see that mark and they accept. And Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam then recites the Torah. And by this time, the copies of the Torah were very precious and there was very few remaining. So somebody went and found an old Torah, and it was exactly word for word as Hazrat Uzayr alayhi salam had recited, subhanallah. And the glorious Quran, in many ayats of the amazing Quran, relays this. It says in Surah Baqarah verse 259, and he said, how will Allah revive it after it had perished? So Allah left him dead for 100 years, then brought him back to life. He said, "How long have you remained here?" He submitted, "I stayed maybe a day or part of a day." Then Allah Azza wa Jal said, "Rather, 100 years have passed you by."
We love Madani Channel. We love Madani Channel. We love Madani Channel.